want you to take a second and just picture your absolute perfect version of heaven. Or, if you prefer a more secular view, your ultimate perfect utopia, just visualize it right now.
Just really build it out in your mind.
Exactly. What does it look like? Because chances are it's filled with absolutely everything you love, right? You're probably picturing like total comfort, maybe endless wealth, magnificent places to live.
Perfect weather, obviously.
Right, perfect weather. And of course, being surrounded by your family and your closest friends. It sounds incredible. But what if that exact vision, like that specific picture you just constructed in your head, is the very reason you could never actually get there?
It's a profoundly jarring concept to entertain, honestly. The idea that our own personal definition of paradise is, well, it's the very lock on the gate keeping us out.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are venturing into honestly, a highly radical philosophical blueprint for utopia. It challenges basically everything we think we know about human desire.
We're exploring a really fascinating essay today. It was written in October 2023 by an author named Quiffing, and it's titled, "We Are the Obstacle Preventing Ourselves from Going to Heaven."
The mission for our discussion today is to unpack this text's central premise, which is that everything we think we know about what makes a perfect world is completely backwards.
Right, because usually we look around at the chaotic state of the world and we blame, I don't know, external forces for our lack of peace.
Oh, totally. We blame the economy or corrupt politicians.
Historical, societal structures, all of that.
Exactly. But this text, it forces us to look in the mirror and ask a much more uncomfortable question. Like, is human nature itself, our baseline consciousness and the very mechanics of what we want, is that the ultimate roadblock to utopia?
And to even begin answering that, the author insists we have to basically dismantle our current definition of heaven. Because according to the text, our standard vision of paradise is not just vague, it is entirely reversed.
Reverse, that's such a strong word for it.
It really is.
Yeah.
The argument is that it's built strictly on earthly greed and ordinary desires that we've just projected into a mystical realm.
Right. The author actually lists out the most common visions people hold. Streets paved with gold and silver jewelry, magnificent sprawling palaces.
Joyous reunions with all our blood relatives.
Yes, and just this overarching freedom to simply, quote, do whatever one wants.
Which, sounds like the standard bullet points for a great afterlife. But the text aggressively rejects that. The author literally asks, is this heaven? Of course not.
Yeah, the argument is that this vision is really just a reflection of ordinary human greed. And to explain why this desire-driven vision fails so spectacularly, the source material uses this brilliant, highly specific analogy. I like to call it the delicious beverage problem.
I love this analogy so much. So the author asks us to imagine walking into a 5-star hotel. You walk up to the waiter and you say, I want a very delicious beverage.
And the waiter, despite being in like a world-class establishment capable of making literally anything, cannot serve you.
Because delicious is just a personal, highly subjective feeling.
Right. The universe, or, the waiter in this scenario, cannot fulfill a subjective feeling without objective coordinates. The text lists out all these incredibly specific possibilities to highlight how absurd it is.
Yeah, the waiter has to wonder, does this person want tea, coffee, fruit juice, champagne,
A milkshake,
coconut milk, reishi mushroom soup, or, and this is by far the most bizarre and memorable option listed in the text, opium watermelon juice.
I mean, the bizarre specificity of opium watermelon juice is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that metaphor.
It really is.
But it perfectly illustrates how chaotic and strangely specific human desires actually are. If you cannot explain clearly what the exact ingredients of your paradise are, the universe can't provide it.
Right. Without a clear, universally applicable goal, the wish just can't be fulfilled. It remains a fantasy.
Exactly.
I sort of look at it like plugging a destination into your GPS. If you get in your car and just type somewhere awesome into the search bar, the GPS is going to give you an error. Right. It needs precise coordinates.
You need coordinates. And the deeper problem with human desire is that our coordinates are constantly shifting. Like, what fulfills you on a Tuesday might completely bore you by Thursday.
Oh, absolutely.
But I do want to challenge the author's categorization of these desires for a second, because I understand how wanting streets of gold is rooted in materialism. That's an easy line to draw.
Sure.
But wanting to reunite with your blood relatives, classifying the desire to see your family again as greed, feels incredibly harsh. I mean, it kind of treats basic, beautiful human affection as a character flaw.
Yeah, and that's a completely natural reaction to the text.
Hmm.
But we have to look at the philosophical framework the author's operating within here. They aren't necessarily judging human affection as malicious.
Okay, then what do they say?
Well, they're making a point about the mechanics of consciousness. The text argues that as long as our goals are anchored in personal, ego-driven gratification, even the gratification of personal family bonds, our consciousness remains stuck in an earthly, divisive paradigm.
Oh, I see. So you are still operating from a mindset of mine.
Exactly. My gold, my palace, my family.
So by prioritizing my personal attachments, I am inherently creating a hierarchy. Like my family is more important than your family.
Precisely the author's point. If your baseline for paradise requires elevating your personal circle above the rest of existence, you are still operating within the framework of earthly division.
You haven't transcended the ego.
Right. You have just moved your ego to a nicer neighborhood.
Wow. Okay, well, that sets up a massive problem for you, the listener, then. Because if our current definition of heaven is flawed and ego-driven, what's the alternative?
And that's where the text provides a corrected, radical blueprint of what heaven actually looks like. And the shock of this blueprint isn't what this heaven features.
No, it's what it completely removes. It defines paradise strictly by absence. It's basically a total, unapologetic erasure of the structures of society as we know them.
The list of absences in the source material is, honestly, it's staggering when you consider the logistical implications.
Mm.
The author states that in heaven, there are no countries, there are no religions, no political parties, and no organizations.
And moving down to the interpersonal level, there are no marriages, no families, no private properties, no money, and no official positions.
It goes even further into the granular maintenance of society, too. No distinctions between people.
Yeah.
No crimes, laws, courts, precepts, or rules.
Right. No police, no soldiers, no civil servants, no government institutions, and no administrative orders. It is a complete wiping of the societal slate.
It's just totally gone.
Now, the text does balance this by claiming it's a place of infinite, abundant resources,
Yeah.
right? Where there are absolutely no worries about food, clothing, shelter, transportation, or safety.
Yes.
But the mechanisms we use to organize human life are simply gone. How does a society even function without laws or administrative orders to manage that abundance?
Well, the sociological argument being made here is that institutions like laws, courts, and police are not actually the glue holding society together.
Oh, no.
No, they are rather the bandages we apply to the wounds caused by our own greed. We create laws because we have crime. We have courts because we have disputes over property.
And we have borders and countries because we have tribal divisions.
Exactly. The text suggests that a true heavenly consciousness wouldn't need these structures because the foundational desire to hoard or control or divide simply wouldn't exist anymore.
So the self-regulation of society would be automatic because the ego has been removed.
You got it.
I mean, I hear the logic in that, but it brings up a profound existential question for me. It reminds me of playing a complex video game and deciding to turn on God mode.
Oh, yeah.
You type in the cheat code and suddenly you have infinite health, infinite money, and none of the game's rules or boundaries apply to you anymore. And it is a blast. For exactly 10 minutes.
Right, then you just quit playing.
Then, inevitably, it gets incredibly boring. Because the struggle, the rules, the friction of trying to overcome obstacles, that is what actually gives the game its meaning.
That's a really good point.
So if we strip away family, if we strip away personal relationships, property, and personal achievements, do we lose the very friction that makes us human? Without any structure to push against, what do we actually do with our existence?
I would argue the author anticipates that exact objection. They would probably say your fear of losing that friction is a symptom of earthly conditioning.
Interesting. How so?
Well, we equate struggle with meaning because struggle is all we have ever known. We have, in a way, trauma bonded with existence.
Wow, trauma bonded with existence. That's heavy.
It is.
Wow.
The author's counterargument is that peace, universal harmony, and existence without conflict only feel boring to a mind that is still addicted to the adrenaline of the ego.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, in a higher state of consciousness, the need to overcome obstacles just to feel valuable totally evaporates.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It is essentially asking us to evolve past our own psychology. And that is exactly where the text shifts from the theoretical architecture of heaven to the practical daily requirements for getting there.
Right, because the author directly addresses why we are failing to reach this state.
Because if heaven requires the total absence of these societal structures, humanity fails the entrance exam on four very specific behavioral fronts.
The text outlines four strict tests of consciousness, four behavioral requirements we must achieve to prove our minds meet the standard for heaven. And the author really emphasizes that these four actions are entirely within our own individual control.
Yeah, they don't rely on the government changing or the economy shifting. They are choices we make regardless of the era or country we live in.
Exactly. So these four rules mirror the societal structures we just discussed erasing. The requirements are, first, not getting married.
Right.
Second, not acquiring private property. Third, not participating in any religious, political, or organizational activities.
And fourth, this is the one that forces you to really pause. The fourth requirement is not establishing any special emotional or interest relationships with anyone.
Yeah, that fourth requirement is the ultimate test of dismantling the ego. It is really the crucible of the author's philosophy.
But consider what that actually requires of you, the listener, in your daily life. Try to imagine navigating tomorrow without prioritizing your spouse, your child, or your absolute best friend over a complete stranger on the street.
It feels entirely unnatural.
It really does. To me, giving up politics makes logical sense for a peaceful utopia. Giving up private property. Sure, I can see how that systematically removes greed, but giving up special emotional bonds.
It's a lot to ask.
Doesn't this sound less like spiritual enlightenment and more like emotional flatlining? How can a place possibly be considered heaven if you aren't allowed to have a favorite person?
It is undoubtedly a harsh concept for the modern mind to integrate.
Yeah.
But if we follow the author's logic to its absolute conclusion, any special attachment inherently creates an in-group and an out-group. If you have a best friend, you inherently value that person's safety, happiness, and prosperity more than a stranger's.
And valuing one person over another is the root of inequality.
Exactly the author's point. Exclusive love creates jealousy, favoritism, and systemic inequality. The obstacle, referenced in the title of the essay, the reason we prevent ourselves from going to heaven, is our stubborn insistence that our personal relationships are more important than universal, equal harmony.
So the text demands a radical impartiality.
Yes, it is asking for a universal love that is spread so evenly across all of existence that no single person is elevated above another.
The author actually writes, we simply cannot resist the temptations of money, power, status, fame, and beauty. We lack the firm beliefs to resist these things.
Yeah.
And as a reader, it would be remarkably easy to just dismiss these four rules as purely theoretical. You could read this essay and say, well, this is just a thought experiment about a utopia that could never exist in the real world.
But the text reveals a fascinating twist here.
It does.
The author didn't just write a philosophical manifesto. They actually put this radical lifestyle to the test in reality.
Right. The essay transitions from abstract philosophy to practical application. The author explains that in 2009, they replicated the lifestyle of what they call the 1,000-year world right here on Earth.
And we should probably define that term, the 1,000-year world. In the context of the author's broader writings, it refers to an earthly, transitional utopian state.
Like a precursor environment where people can prepare their consciousness for the actual heaven.
Yes, it is the earthly proving ground. And the author created a physical community based on these principles called the second home.
According to the source text, those living in this second home have, quote, savored the sweet taste of heavenly life for over a decade now.
They have allegedly actualized this environment. They live without acquiring private property, without marriage, and without traditional organizational structures.
They share resources and attempt to live out that radical impartiality.
Right. But this is the crux of the entire essay. The author openly admits that despite this earthly heaven, knocking at our doorsteps, very few people are actually eager to embrace it.
Yeah, the blueprint is available, the community exists, and yet people are hesitating. The masses are definitely not flocking to join the second home.
And rather than seeing this as a failure of the community's design, the author uses this low participation rate as the ultimate proof of their entire thesis.
Wait, how so?
Well, the text concludes that once an individual's mind is resolute, no external force, not the government, not society, not even the devil, can stop them from achieving this state.
Okay.
Therefore, the fact that people choose not to join proves that humanity's outdated consciousness and deep-seated selfishness are the true barriers. We are literally keeping ourselves out.
Okay, I have to push back on that conclusion. Let's look at this objectively.
Sure.
We have a real second home community operating since 2009. The author says the low adoption rate proves we're just too selfish, too egotistical for utopia. But is that the only interpretation?
Probably not the only one, no.
Right. Does the fact that so few people want to join actually prove that we are selfish? Or does it suggest that this specific, structureless, emotion-leveling version of heaven is fundamentally incompatible with the human condition?
That is the million-dollar question.
Perhaps people aren't staying away because they are greedy for money, but because they intuitively understand that a life without special emotional bonds isn't a life they want to live.
And that tension is exactly what makes the source material so compelling to analyze. The author would counter your argument by saying that your intuitive desire for special emotional bonds is precisely the outdated consciousness they're talking about.
Ah, so I'm just defending my ego.
Yeah, you're defending the ego's attachments. The text's ultimate message is that utopia cannot be built on top of our current psychology. It requires a complete and total rewiring of human consciousness from the ground up.
So they think the problem is still us.
Yes. In the author's view, the second home isn't failing because the model is anti-human. People are failing to join because they cannot bear the pain of letting go of their individual identities. The community serves as a mirror, basically reflecting just how deeply entrenched we are in our flawed ways of living.
The text actually states, our entrenched beliefs, outdated consciousness, selfishness, and stubborn attachment to our egos and viewpoints serve as the barriers. It is an incredibly heavy indictment of how we navigate our daily lives.
It really is.
I mean, we spend all our energy trying to secure a good job, a nice house, and a loving partner, thinking we are building a successful life.
While the author is telling us we are actually just laying the bricks for the walls of our own prison, it demands that we interrogate everything we value. It asks us to look at our deepest comforts and ask if they are actually chains.
Man, bringing this deep dive full circle, what does all of this mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day? The core takeaway from today's source material is that the barrier to paradise isn't a physical wall.
Right. It isn't a mystical gatekeeper.
No, it is purely psychological. The text posits that it is our deep-rooted attachment to our individual identities, our need to own property, and our biological drive for exclusive, special relationships that keeps us locked out of the utopia the author describes.
It is a profound challenge to the fundamental ways we define happiness and purpose. The essay suggests that until we are willing to shed the very things that make us feel like unique individuals, we can never participate in true universal harmony.
We basically have to choose between our personal ego and universal peace.
Exactly.
Now, as we explore these deeply philosophical and, frankly, radical ideas, we do want to remind you that our goal is to impartially examine the arguments presented in the source material.
Absolutely. We aren't endorsing the second home. We're saying you should drop everything and live this lifestyle.
Right, we are just unpacking how this text challenges conventional wisdom about human nature and the structures of our society, allowing you to view these concepts from a totally new angle.
It is a text that forces you to examine your own internal baseline. Even if you completely reject the author's proposed solution of erasing personal relationships and property, the essay succeeds in making you acutely aware of how much your vision of happiness relies on exclusion and possession.
Yeah, that awareness is the real value of engaging with material like this. And that brings me back to where we started this entire conversation. Remember that perfect picture of heaven or utopia I asked you to visualize at the very beginning of the show?
The one filled with your family, your favorite places, your unique comforts.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your week. If achieving absolute, perfect, universal peace requires erasing every single special relationship, every piece of personal property, and every unique group identity you hold dear, is a conflict-free utopia a place you would actually want to live?
Or are the messy, painful, and deeply personal attachments of this earthly life exactly what give it value in the first place?